We'll start with number formats. So number formatting is on the home ribbon, and it's this group here. And we have some standard number formats that are created for you. So general is the format that you will start with when you create an Excel spreadsheet. All cells come out as general. We've got the number format, which allows me to say that it is actually a number. We can change that to currency, where it will add a pound sign, the comma for thousands, and 2 decimal places. The important thing to remember about this group is that it doesn't actually change what's in the cell. So although I'm looking at it and I can see a pound sign and a comma and decimal places, in my formula bar, it still says 1,000. So all this is doing is changing how we see it on the screen. If I go to this one, I'm going to format this as a percentage. Now, when you first format something as a percentage, it will multiply it by 100. I'm a fan of cake. If I eat one cake, I've eaten 100% of it, which is quite common. If I click percentage up here, it will multiply it to turn it into a percentage. So if I've got 80 in here and I wanted 80% and I click this percentage button, it's going to make it 8,000%. Instead of that, if I've already got the value for the percentage I want, I can click into the cell and type the percent sign. When I press enter and click back on it, Excel has recognized that I'm creating a percent and it's formatted it as a percentage for me. This means that I can now type in the value of the percent that I want, 20%, 100%, and it will keep that value. So it's only when I first change it to a percentage value that I need to change what's in the cell. Now, having said it doesn't actually change the value underneath, changing it to a percentage clearly has, but if I go back to a number, it changes back to my decimal value. The other thing that we format mostly with this section here are dates. So although we call it number formatting, we can format other things as well. So this is actually a date. It might not look like a date. 45,524 looks like a number. But with dates, Excel doesn't know what a date is, and it doesn't actually care. Dates start on the 1st of January 1900. The important thing about that is you can't work in the 19th century. So any date that you try to put in before 1900 will not be recognized as a date, and it will stay as the general format. Doesn't matter if you try and change the format, it will stay as either text or general. So if I click on here and select short date, it will give me the 20th of August 2024. What that means is that there were 45,524 days since the 1st of January 1900. The good thing about working with dates and them actually being what we call date serial numbers, the number that sits underneath, is that we can do things like adding and subtracting. So if I want to add a day to that day there, I can select the day, +1, and press enter. So that's added a day to this date here. So if 1 is a whole day, 0.48 is part of a day. And if I go to my formatting and choose time, that's 11.5 hours. So 0.48 represents 11:30 in the morning. I've got 2 more dates here that have a decimal point, which shows me that there is some sort of time attached to it. So on here, I can choose short date and it will give me the day, or I can choose time and it will give me the time. What I don't have on this list is the ability to show date and time. So I'm going to go to more number formats. So these are the categories that we saw from the drop down: number, currency, date, time. If I go down to the bottom, I'm going to use custom. I'm going to take out what it says in type, and I'm going to create my own number format. Now, if you were with me last week for the mail merge, you will have seen some of the codes that are available in mail merge being used in Excel. So the code for a day is D. 1 will give me single digit, 2 will give me double digit, 3 will give me the short name of the day of the week, 4 will give me the full name of the day of the week. And with some of them, if you press again, it will just give you the initial. So I want to create date and time. So 2Ds, /, 2 M's for month, the double digit, so I get 08, / 4 Y's to give me the full year. So that's recreated effectively what I had in my short date. I'm now going to put a space and I'm going to start creating the format for time. So H for hours, I'm going to do 2, colon and 2 M's for minute, colon and 2 S's for seconds. So what I've done now is I've created my own format that has the day, the month, the year, the hours, the minutes and the seconds. And if I click OK now, I've got my full day and time being displayed. One of the biggest problems with numbers is leading zeros. This is actually Kiss's phone number, and I typed it in and put a 0 at the start, and as soon as I pressed enter, the 0 vanished. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a telephone number format. So back to my general drop down, more number formats, and I'm going to click on custom and take out general. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the dialing code inside brackets. So I'm just going to create a sample text here with a bracket. Now, if you want to force a number, we use the code 0. And I can see there some codes already created. So there must be a number. There must be 2 decimal places because there are 2 zeros. The one underneath shows me the format for the 1000 separators. But instead of having all zeros, it's got these hash signs. And that means that the number is optional. So if I get to 4 digits, it puts in a comma. So it's optional. If there aren't 4 digits, it ignores these hash marks. There must be at least 1 digit. So by putting in the right number of zeros that will have 01827 and closing the brackets, I can then add the remaining characters outside. So 265000. One too many zeros. No, not enough zeros. There we go. So I've now created a format that forces it to have the 5 characters for the dialing code, and I've put nice neat little brackets around it, and has the rest of the number outside. If I added another 0, I would start seeing zeros replace the front of my number. So that's my code that I've created to make a telephone number format. And if I click OK now, I can then use the format painter to copy that to somewhere else. So once I've created the code, I can either use format painter, or if I go back to my number formats, any formats that I've created will appear at the bottom for this spreadsheet. So I've got those that I've created sat ready and waiting. There is a handout that we will let you have, which is the number formatting. So if I just show you this one. So we've got all of the number formatting above, and then we've got the different codes that can be used. So you can see we've got different ones for numbers, some for text, some for dates, some for time, and then additional ones down here. You can actually change the color based on the value, and we'll look at doing that in a minute. And you can add conditions. So these are the comparison operators: less than, greater than, equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and not equal to. And they can also be used in your formatting. So you may see some of these where you will get a red number if it's minus. You might get a green one if it's 0, and you might get something different where it says text. There are different ways of creating that. The first one is to use one of the known color names. So these are the names of the colors that you can use in your number formatting. All of the others, and I think there are 59 in a color palette, can be accessed by using color equals and then picking a color. I do actually, I think, have a colour palette of what they look like. None of them are particularly pretty, so I tend to stick to these. But if you're interested, I can let you have the color palette and the corresponding numbers. So I'm going to create a format for these numbers and this text here, because so far all we've looked at is just creating a single format. Good way of finding out what to do is to look at what's here already. So I can see that there is one here that's got red. So the minus value has got red in front of it in square brackets. There are actually 4 different areas that you can format in number formatting: positive values, negative values, 0 values, and text. So I can create a format for any of those. And I'm going to steal this one here as my initial value. So this is my positive values. This is my negative values, separated by a colon. And what I'm going to do is just in front of there, I'm going to add green. So any positive values should be green. And if it goes as far as 4 digits, it should have a colon for the thousand separator. All of my negative values will be shown as red, and they will have the thousand separator, but a minus in front. I have seen formats where they've used brackets and no minuses for negative values. That's entirely up to you. And then I'm going to miss out 0 values by putting in 2 semicolons. In other words, if the value in the cell is 0, I don't want to see it. I don't want it formatting. And the last one is text. And I'm going to say that all text says this is text. So I'm creating 4 different sections. The first one is my positives. The color must always be at the front. So you always start with the color. Conditions come next, which we'll look at in a minute. And then the formatting that you want to use. And it is always done positive, negative, 0, text. If I now click OK, my zero's vanished. Text has been replaced by this is text. My text value is still in my formula bar. So these haven't changed at all. All I've done is changed the way that they're displayed. So if you've got lots of 0 values and you don't want to see zeros everywhere, then you can use number formatting to get rid of it. Okay, so that's number formatting. There is an extra area of data types. So far we've talked about date and time and numbers and that sort of thing. I've just thrown this in here to show you what is also available. If I go to my data ribbon, there are different data types, and one of those is geography. So if I convert these into geographical data types, it's already done London for me. It's not sure about Tamworth because we've got lots of different Tamworths depending on which country you want Tamworth to be in. So I'm going to say that this is Tamworth in Staffordshire, and it's now given me data types of geography. And what that means is I can then click on this plus and I can have a look at other information. So we could look at population. So there's the population for Tamworth, and there's the one for London. So just to make you aware that there are other data types, not just numbers, and they are available on the data ribbon. So I said we were going to look at using some conditions in number formatting, and here I've got some grades. So they sat pure mathematics tests rather than me. They've done 3 of them. I've got their names down here, and their results for the 3 different tests are over here. The pass mark is 65. Now, I don't know about you, but a quick glance at that doesn't tell me who's passed and who's failed the tests. So I'm going to create a number format that will make it easier for me to be able to see that. I'm going to display the word pass in green if they've passed, and red and fail if they've failed. So I'm going to format this section here, and I select it. I'm going to create a number format, which is going to be a custom one. And I'm going to start off by saying I'm going to do green, and then my condition goes inside brackets as well. So greater than or equal to, if they've scored 65, we'll let them pass, 65. And I want to put in the text, which I put in double quotes for text, the word pass. Semicolon, because I'm adding a second condition. So this time I want it to be red in square brackets. Again, in square brackets, my condition, less than 65, and then the text that I want to add, the word fail. Click OK, and now instantly I can see pass, failed that one, failed both, failed all of them, failed the last one. Much easier to be able to see what you're doing if you've got words instead of numbers, and they're nice pretty colours. So I've got a list of orders here, and I want to know how long it took us to process the order. So I've got the customer, the order ID, the date it was ordered, the date they said they wanted it, when we actually shipped it, and where we shipped it to. In my process time, I want to know how long between the order and the ship date. So I'm doing a basic formula to say equals the date we shipped it minus the date they ordered it, and that will give me the processing time. Because it's a date, I need to change it back to a number, and I probably don't want decimal places, so I can get rid of those. I want this for all of these, so I'm going to double click and it will fill right down to the bottom. So if I scroll down, I've got lots of things here, and there are a few that say value. The reason they say value is because we haven't shipped it yet. There's blanks in here. So if you join me for the if session for Excel, we'll look at how to get rid of that. So what I want to know is how long we have left to ship any orders that we haven't shipped yet. So if I do equals the required date, and I need to know how long between then and now. So I would normally do minus today's date. But because that's going to change, I'm going to use one of the functions available for dates, and that's the function called today. All functions have open and close brackets, and all that does is it gives me today's date. So that would allow me to put this in. Obviously, that's going to be an error because today and the ship date and the required date are in the past. But if I copy that down, wherever we've got the errors, we should start seeing values, which I need to change to a number. And then I've done them the wrong way around, which doesn't help. I'll take away the decimal places. Let's try that one again. So it should be today minus the ship date, the required date. That should look a bit better. Or not. Maybe it was right the first time. But what I'm able to do there is I can see how long we've got left before we need to ship the particular product to the customer. Wherever I've got a value error, it's because my dates are in the past, one's greater than the other. So we can add and subtract dates. I've got a fun little thing here. I'm going to put in today's date using the equals today and open and close brackets. If you wanted the time as well, we can do equals now, which gives me date and time if I make this wide enough, so I can now see that it is 1:32. I'm going to put in my date of birth, nobody look. And then I'm going to work out how many days I've been alive. So I do equals today's date minus when I was born, and it will tell me I've been alive for 18,695 days. I also want to know what day of the week I was born. So I'm going to do equals my date of birth, and then I'm going to use my number formatting, and I'm going to replace the format that I've got in there with 4 days, press enter, and I was born on a Friday. So that's just a fun thing to find out how many days old you are and what day of the week you were born. Going back to more serious things, I've got the start of the month here. I want to know what the end of the month is. Now that's easy because it's 1st of January and I know how many days there are in January. But if that month changes, so does my end of the month. So one of the functions available is something called EO month or end of month. So if I type equals EOM, I can see it listed there. returns the serial number of the last day of the month before or after a specified number of months. So let's make that make sense. Serial number is just the date that sits underneath. So remember 45,000 and whatever it was yesterday. It just gives me the number instead. If I format it as a date, it'll look just like this date. Last day of the month, so it will find the last day of the month. And then I can add criteria. So I can look for the end of the month in advance of this or previous to this. So let's see what that looks like. If I double click, it opens the brackets. This is my start date. And then if I hit comma, it asks me how many months ahead or behind. So if I want the last day of January, I'd put 0 in. If I want the last day of February, I'd put 1 in. If I want to go back to December, I put -1 in. And it will go that number of months ahead or behind and find the last day. I'm going to stick with 0, press enter, and it gives me the end of January. If I change this and make it June, it will tell me the last day of the month of June. If it's a leap year, because the year's there as well, February will still give me the right values. So that's great. When we were looking at our orders, we wanted to know how long it had taken us to process an order. The problem is that's calendar days, and most of us do not work 7 days a week. So what I want to know is how many working days. So I'm going to use something called net work days. So equals, I start typing it, net work days. Whole working days between two dates. Notice whole working days. So if I've got times as well, and the time I'm looking at is before this time, my start time, then it won't count it as a full working day. So network days. It's got 3 arguments or bits of information it needs. The first thing it needs to know is when does this period start? So I'm going to give it the start of the month being the 1st of January. Comma, it wants the end date. That's the last day I'm looking at. So this is going to find how many working days there are between the 1st of January and the 31st of January. There's an optional one here which allows me to exclude holidays. So if I hit comma, I can exclude a list of dates that we've said are not to be included in working days. So this could be bank holiday dates, which I've pulled out here. It could be your annual leave. If you only work on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you can exclude Mondays and Fridays in that list of dates. So I'm going to ask how many working days there are in January, excluding UK holidays. I'm going to do the same thing again with the US. So equals net work days. Start date, comma, end date, comma, list of holidays. So in January, if you were in the US, you'd have done 1 less working day because they have 1 more holiday. And another little bit of fun here. When would you like to retire? If you've put in your date of birth, you put in your retirement age, it will tell you how many working days there are until you can retire. So if I went for 55, I've only got 997 days left to work. So what that's doing is it's using network days. It's then using today's date. So every day you open this and look at it, it'll be a day better, a day closer to retirement. And then the end date is created by taking the day and the month of your date of birth and then adding your retirement date to the years so that it knows the day on which you plan to retire, and it then creates that as number of days for you to retire. So if you wanted to exclude holidays from that, which clearly I haven't done, you would need to create a list of all of the bank holidays and your annual leave days now and your retirement date. Over here, I've created a list of months. So as you can see, it's just got the initial of the month. Underneath, I've got the actual short date, And if I look at my custom number formatting, remember I said if I put 5 in, it just gives me the initial in some instances, and that works for months. So if I want to know the number of days in that month, then I can do equals. Let's do the full days first. So what I want is to take the start of the month away from the end of the month. So EO month will give me the end. If I use that and 0, minus the start of the month, and that will tell me how many days there are in each of these months. Working days would be something similar. So I've got my number of days already. I'm going to cheat and just copy that. So number of working days from the start date to the end date, but this time I want my net work days. So net work days. The start date is going to be K2 because that's the first day of the month. The end date is going to be my end of month. So I can just copy that in with no extra days. And then I'm going to exclude the holidays that I've got listed. And I'm going to change the number format back to numbers. And I can find out how many working days there are for each of those. So what I've done there is I've forgotten that this set of dates is stuck in a section of cells. So when I've copied it down, it's copied it down as well. So what I needed to remember to do is in here, because these dates are not going to move from those cells, I need to use the magic dollar signs or F4, and that fixes the cell references to that range there. So when I copy it down, that cell reference stays in the same place. So because I always want to use these cells, and when I copy it down, relative references will move with me, I need to fix that cell reference up at the top. And that will then give me the number of days, so I can see that actually July and October have got the most working days in them. So the other thing that I can also do is in here, I can look at the number of days in August and I can exclude my holidays. So what I said is my working days between these dates. If I was to use my network days, start date, I will just cheat at the moment and use the 1st of August up here, and the last one being the end of August. So EO month, August, 0 months, and then exclude holidays. I want bank holidays and also my holidays. And when I press enter, I get a value error. The reason for that is I've got this text in the middle of that range. If I delete the text, that will then work. So I can use separated values, but not if there's text in the way. That's why it comes up with the value error to tell me that one of the cells in my range is not a value. And just quickly, I will move on to a secret function. The secret function that doesn't exist. So if you go to formulas and you look at the date and time functions, there is no date diff. So this has been included in Excel, but it's not advertised. And what it allows me to do is ignore things like years and calculate specific things. So the format is equals date diff, start date, end date, and then what you want to display. So D at the end will give me days. M will give me the number of months between two values. Y will give me the number of whole years between two values. Months without years. So if I do YM at the end, it will calculate the number of months between this month and that month, ignoring the years. The same thing for days, so the number of days between the 16th of January to the 21st of August, ignoring the years. And if I want to ignore the months and years and just work out the number of days between these two values, I can use MD at the end. And this isn't publicised generally. Now, I know we are a little bit short of time, but I do just want to go across to the invoice that we're going to be building over the next few months. And this is my invoice here. So let me just make that display my ribbon. Because what I want to do is I want to start adding some of the formatting that we've seen. So the invoice date, instead of being a fixed date, I want that to always display today's date. So I'm going to use the function equals today. That way I know it's going to display the day that I open it up. My invoice number, I want to have 2 zeros at the front of number 1. So I'm going to go to my number formatting and I'm going to create a custom number format and I'm going to force it to have at least 3 digits. So when I click OK, it now has a minimum of 3 digits. So that's the formatting on this page. And then on my orders, I've got an order date and then I want a delivery date that's 7 days in advance and an invoice due date that's 30 days after the order date. So I'm just going to put in today's date just so that we can see what the result is. And my delivery date is going to be my order date plus 7. So I'm expecting to have my delivery done by that date. My invoice is going to be due 30 days after the order. So I can do that date plus 30 and I know when my invoice is due. So I've done some additional formulas on here and that will then allow me when my order's placed to know when I should be delivering it and when I should be paid for it. So I'm just going to save that and we'll start building that up with the other things that are going to make my final invoice. So that's number formatting. Also letting you know that there are other data types that aren't controlled from the home ribbon. Hopefully you found that useful. Hopefully it will allow you to create your own number formats to display things exactly how you want it, not limited to just what's available on here. Remember, in this area, when we're formatting, they will just change how you see it on the screen. So if it's got decimal places and you don't show them, it will still have the decimal places underneath. All it does is change how we see it on the screen, but it allows us to present the data in a nice, neat format instead.